The wind on Mars had a voice of its own. It moaned across the rusted frames of Delta 7's shattered dome, carrying with it a fine red dust that hissed against Cade Hart's helmet like sandpaper. The colony had been silent for years, a skeleton of its former self left to rot after the Terran-Valen War. Yet here he was, stepping over broken support beams and jagged shards of glass, chasing a signal that shouldn't exist. Cade adjusted the strap of his rifle, the weight of it pressing against his shoulder like an old memory he couldn't shake. He wasn't a soldier anymore. Those days had been burned out of him along with the refugee ship that had taken his wife. The explosion still haunted him at night, a flicker of light in the dark behind his eyelids. He had signed on as a scavenger after that, moving from one dead place to the next, pretending he was looking for salvage when, deep down, he was just looking for something to fill the silence. The colony loomed before him like the bones of a fallen giant. Towers of corroded metal jutted from the sand, their surfaces eaten away by decades of storms. A tangle of old communication arrays, long snapped in half, swung lazily in the Martian wind, creaking like the echo of distant screams. Cade's boots left prints in the ochre dust, marks that the wind would erase in minutes. He glanced at the blinking dot on his wrist tracker, the signal still strong. Whatever had sent that message was inside. He crossed through the outer gates, their reinforced frames scorched black from ancient firefights. Every step into Delta 7 felt like a descent into someone else's nightmare. Broken helmets, shattered visors, the remains of machines twisted into grotesque shapes. It was all here, a silent museum of a war everyone pretended was over. Cade's breath rasped softly inside his helmet, the sound unnervingly loud in the absence of life. The signal led him toward the command center, the one building still standing with its roof mostly intact. Its heavy blast doors had been forced open long ago, perhaps by scavengers less cautious than him. Cade hesitated before stepping through the threshold, the dim light of his helmet lamp cutting across a room full of shadows and wreckage. Dust swirled in lazy spirals around his boots as he advanced, his rifle raised, scanning every corner. Then he saw it. In the middle of the room, just beyond a collapsed terminal, something pulsed with a soft, rhythmic glow. It wasn't the harsh white of failing electronics, but a warm, almost organic light, shifting through colors like the slow breath of something alive. Cade's brow furrowed. This wasn't a machine signal. This was something else. He took another step, his fingers tightening around the grip of his rifle. The air felt heavier, and for a moment he thought he could hear faint humming, almost like a song too quiet to place. His instinct screamed at him to back out, to call it in, but he didn't move. Curiosity had always been his curse. Then a voice cut through the silence. "Please, don't shoot. I'm not your enemy." The words weren't mechanical. They were soft, melodic, trembling with something human and not human at the same time. Cade froze, every nerve in his body alight, the pulse of the strange glow reflecting in his visor. "It's easier for me to copy the text and make voices." The glow pulsed again, softer this time, as if whatever was in the shadows was breathing with caution. Cade's finger hovered near the trigger. His visor's HUD scanned the space, but there was nothing, no thermal signature, no life form. ID ping. Only the voice, faint and trembling, carried through the wreckage. "Show yourself," Cade commanded, his tone flat but edged with warning. He moved in a slow arc around the collapsed terminal, boots crunching on the glass-strewn floor. The Martian wind wailed through a crack in the dome overhead, and for a moment it sounded like distant whispers. He didn't like this. He'd seen too many outposts turn into ambush grounds during the war, too many promises of peace that were nothing but bait. Then something stirred in the shadows. It wasn't like anything Cade had ever seen. A silhouette emerged, slender and tall, moving with a grace that didn't belong to this ruined place. The glow came from her, from smooth, iridescent skin that shimmered like liquid pearl under his helmet light. Her eyes were enormous, golden, reflecting him like twin suns. Instead of hair, thin strands of filament-like tendrils floated around her head, shifting as though alive and sensing the air. She raised her hands slowly, palms outward. "Please," she said again, her voice low and clear. "I won't harm." "You," Cade stiffened, his breath fogging his visor. Alien, Valen. The memories slammed into him. The war zones. The burning skies, the screams of people dying because both sides were too stubborn to listen. The last time he saw one of her kind, they were enemies. "What are you doing here?" Cade demanded, his rifle steady though his heart pounded. "This colony is dead. Everyone's gone." She stepped fully into the light now, her glow casting. Fractured patterns on the ruined walls, her voice quivered. "I was left behind. When your kind fled." "You're not human," Cade said, as if saying it aloud would make sense of this strange, fragile presence. "I am not," she admitted softly. "My name is Thesisa." Her golden eyes locked on his, filled with something that wasn't fear. It was more like longing, the weight of years lived alone. "You came because of the signal. I sent it." Cade hesitated, lowering his rifle slightly but not holstering it. "Why?" Thesisa took a tentative step forward. "Because I need help. I need to bond. And you? You might be the only one who can." Her words hung in the stale air like a blade. Cade frowned, his mind flashing through 100 possibilities. Bond? He didn't like the sound of it. Too many alien rituals, too many traps disguised as kindness. But something in her voice wasn't manipulative. It was raw, naked sorrow. "What does that even mean?" He asked. Her tendrils drifted like silk strands, catching faint light as she tilted her head. "A mind link. An emotional exchange. We share what we feel, what we remember. It's how we survive. Alone too long, we fade. We break." Cade snorted. "That sounds like a psychic parasite." Thesisa's glow dimmed slightly, as though wounded by his words. "It isn't forced. I must ask. Always. And if I say no?" Cade challenged, tightening his grip on the rifle. "Then I will die here," she said quietly. "But I will not force it. I would rather fade than be unwanted." Cade studied her for a long moment. There was no deception in her voice, no sharp edge of threat. Just loneliness, a loneliness so profound it made his chest tighten. He knew that feeling. He carried it like a scar every day since the war ended. "Let's say I consider it," he muttered. "What happens if we bond?" "For a short while," she whispered, "you feel what I feel." "I feel you. No walls, no lies, only truth." He frowned, unsettled. "That's a lot of trust for strangers." Her golden gaze softened. "We wouldn't be strangers for long." The silence stretched between them. Cade's heart pounded, not with fear but something deeper, a quiet, unsettling pull toward her words. He lowered the rifle completely, but kept it in hand. "Fine, talk, I'm listening. But if this is some trick?" Thesisa's voice trembled like wind over glass. "I don't trick, I ask. And right now, I'm asking the only human who's set foot here in years. Will you let me in?" Outside, the storm clawed at the broken dome, the sound of sand and wind howling like the ghosts of Delta 7. Cade stood motionless, torn between instinct and something he couldn't name. In her eyes, he saw the same thing that had haunted him. For years, the unbearable weight of being alone. He didn't answer her question yet. But for the first time in years, Cade Hart didn't feel like the only living soul on Mars. The greenhouse was a graveyard of forgotten life. Broken glass panes let thin streaks of Martian sunlight pierce through clouds of dust. creating pale shafts of light that shifted with every gust of the storm outside. Vines, once carefully cultivated for oxygen and food, had twisted into wild, brittle tangles that clawed at the air like skeletal fingers. Cade Hart stepped over the remnants of a cracked planter, the crunch of dry soil beneath his boots loud. In the silence, Thesisa followed him, her movements so fluid and silent that it was as if she barely disturbed the ground. He set his rifle on the metal frame of an old hydroponic table, but his hand never strayed far from it. His instincts screamed for caution, yet something in her gaze, those molten golden eyes that reflected not just light but something deeper, something like understanding, made it hard to look away. "This was where they grew your food?" she asked softly, brushing her fingertips along the vines. The tendrils on her head glimmered faintly, reacting to the thin shafts of light like living threads of glass. "Yeah," Cade said, his voice flat but edged with memory. "Before the war burned it all down. Before everything here turned to ash? War burns more than soil," she murmured. "It burns hearts." Her gaze turned to him with an intensity that made him shift uncomfortably. "You carry ashes inside you too." Cade's jaw tightened. "You don't know a thing about me, don't I?" she asked, tilting her head. "The way you hold your weapon, like it's the only thing keeping you upright. The way you look at this place, like it's more than ruins. You're not here for salvage alone. You're here because you're empty." Her words hit like a hammer on a locked door he hadn't touched in years. Cade turned away, focusing on the dust motes swirling in the air. "You don't get to read me," he muttered. "Whatever. Bonding thing you're talking about, not interested in some alien trick." She didn't move closer. Instead, she lowered herself onto a rusted bench across from him, sitting with a kind of grace that looked both alien and heartbreakingly human. "It's not a trick. It's how we live. The Valen don't survive isolation. We need connection, true connection, where nothing is hidden. Without it, we wither." She paused, her glowing tendrils dimming slightly. "I have been alone. Here for too long. I feel myself fading." Cade looked at her then, really looked. She didn't appear weak, not in the physical sense. But there was something fragile in the way she held herself, as if every breath took effort. And something inside him, something he thought had died with his wife, stirred with a quiet ache. "And if I refuse?" he asked, his voice harder than he intended. "Then I'll still thank you for coming," she said simply. "Even if you walk away and never look back. I will not force myself on anyone. I'd rather die unbonded than live as an intruder." Then, honesty in her tone unnerved him. Cade had seen plenty of lies dressed as kindness, but this wasn't that. She wasn't begging. She was offering him a choice, even though it might kill her. He sat on the opposite bench, rubbing a hand over his face. "Let's say I believe you. What happens if I do this? What does bonding actually do?" Thesisa's eyes softened. "For a while our minds will touch. You'll feel what I feel. I'll feel you. Memories, emotions, fears, they'll surface, but only what we choose to let through. It's not a weapon, Cade. It's trust." He gave a short, humorless laugh. "Trust. That's not something I have much left of." "Neither do I," she said. Her voice trembled now, a fragile note breaking through. "But I can feel your pain even from here. It's heavy, like iron chains wrapped around your heart. I don't need a bond to know you're hurting." Cade looked down, fists clenched on his knees. He hated that she could see right through him. Without even trying. He hadn't told anyone about the strike on the refugee ship, about the way he'd searched the wreckage for his wife and found nothing but fire. Earth Command had called it a tragedy. Cade called it his fault. "I'm not ready," he muttered. "No one ever is," Thesisa whispered. "But sometimes we have to let someone in, even when it hurts." The silence stretched between them, heavy but not uncomfortable. Outside, the wind clawed at the greenhouse walls, making the vines shiver like ghosts. Cade glanced up, meeting her gaze. The glow of her eyes wasn't harsh or alien anymore. It was warm. Inviting. "If I do this," he said slowly, "and I don't like what I see, what then?" "Then we stop," she said. "No harm, no chains, just an understanding." He studied her for a long moment, his heartbeat echoing in his ears. Maybe it was the emptiness of Delta 7 pressing on him, or maybe it was that voice, soft, melodic, like water trickling through a desert. But he found himself leaning forward just slightly. "What happens first?" he asked. Thesisa extended a hand, her slender fingers trembling. "You take my hand." "And you let me in." Cade's breath caught. His hand hovered in the space between them, inches from hers. And for the first time in years, the silence inside him didn't feel like safety. It felt like prison bars. Cade's fingertips brushed against hers, and the world seemed to shift. The greenhouse vanished, replaced by an expanding white void that pulsed like the beat of a living heart. It wasn't painful, but it was disorienting, like stepping off solid ground into a current that carried him somewhere he had never dared go. A heat bloomed behind his eyes, and with it came a flood of sensations. Her presence was the first thing he felt. Not just her hand, but the essence of Thesisa. A river of emotions that poured into him without words. Loneliness hit first, sharp and raw, as if every hour she'd spent abandoned in Delta 7 was pressing against his own chest. He felt her fear too, that deep, gnawing dread of fading into nothing, of never being seen again. But there was light, mixed in with the pain, curiosity, gentleness, and something like hope, faint but unbreakable. Cade tried to breathe but found he wasn't breathing in the normal sense. Their minds were tethered now, every beat of his heart matched by a rhythm that wasn't his own. "Don't fight it," her voice whispered, not aloud but inside his mind, soft as silk. "Just let it move through you." And then her memories began. Saw her standing on a crystalline cliff under alien skies, the winds of a blue-green world whipping through glowing forests. He felt the hum of Valen voices, a chorus of thoughts braided together, their version of speech. Thesisa was younger then, proud, unscarred, her tendrils glowing with the pulse of life. She had volunteered for the integration program, stepping aboard a Terran diplomatic ship not with fear, but with a fierce determination to understand the humans who had once terrified her people. Cade felt that moment, the rush of newness, of hope that maybe, just maybe, war wasn't the only future. But then came the abandonment. Her memories turned dark. The flashing alarms, the evacuation order, the Terran soldiers shouting as they retreated. He saw her reaching out, calling to them, but no one looked back. The hatch closed, the engines roared, and she was left standing alone in the ruins, her voice lost in the wind. Cade flinched at the sting of it. Her heartbreak felt too real, too close. "Stop," he muttered under his breath, though he didn't let go of her hand. "If I stop, you will never understand," Thesisa whispered. Her thoughts curled around his like smoke, and suddenly his memories rose up to meet hers. He didn't want her to see them. He wanted to lock them down, but the bond pulled them forward. Raw and unfiltered. The first memory hit hard. His wife, Aria, smiling under the neon lights of the San Diego Sky Dome. They had been dancing at the end of a long deployment, her laughter warm against his neck. Then the flash, the refugee ship exploding, the screaming silence that followed. Cade felt his knees weaken as Thesisa saw it all, her golden eyes glimmering with unshed emotion. "I'm sorry," she whispered aloud now, her voice trembling. "I didn't know." Cade's breath came ragged, but something in him cracked open. It wasn't pain. Not exactly. It was the relief of someone finally seeing the wound he'd carried alone for too long. The connection deepened. He felt her reach into the guilt that had consumed him, not to erase it, but to share the weight of it. It was strange, almost unbearable, but also freeing. His thoughts weren't alone anymore. Minutes, maybe hours passed. Time felt strange in the bond. When he blinked and came back to himself, the greenhouse was still around them, dust motes dancing in the shafts of light. Thesisa's hand was still in his, her tendrils glowing faintly. They were both trembling. "The bond doesn't last forever," she said quietly. "Not unless you choose to renew it, to strengthen it." Cade swallowed hard. "And if I don't?" "Then this will fade in a few days like a dream." She hesitated, her gaze holding his. "But I don't want this to fade." Cade stared at her, still reeling from the rush of shared memories. He had spent years building walls around his grief, and in just minutes she had torn them down. It scared him, and yet he didn't want those walls back. Outside, the storm intensified, rattling the greenhouse like an angry hand. Cade didn't move, his voice low and rough. "What happens if we keep bonding?" Thesisa's eyes shimmered, her glow softening like a question she wasn't sure how to answer. "We stop being just you and just me. We become something more." For the first time in years, Cade found himself wanting more. The storm outside had grown into a living thing, howling across the jagged skeleton of Delta 7 as if the ruins themselves were crying out. Cade Hart stood near the shattered window of the greenhouse, watching the sand whip across the horizon like red fire. The bond with Thesisa still burned faintly behind his eyes, an afterglow of shared memories that felt both foreign and intimately his. He wanted to push it away, but part of him was afraid to let it fade. "You feel it too," Thesisa murmured. She was sitting cross-legged on the floor, her tendrils glowing faintly, swaying like strands of liquid light. "The bond doesn't just let me see you. It lets you feel me. The storm feels heavier now because of me, doesn't it?" Cade didn't answer right away. He turned from the window, adjusting the strap on his rifle as if grounding himself. "It's not the storm that feels heavier," he muttered. "It's everything." She tilted her head, those golden eyes holding his gaze in a way that made his skin prickle. "You carry weight you don't need to carry alone anymore." "Maybe I don't want someone carrying it," he shot back, his voice sharper than intended. He wasn't angry at her. He was angry at himself for letting his guard slip, for feeling like someone finally saw him. Thesisa's glow dimmed slightly, but she didn't look away. "Then why did you let me in?" Cade opened his mouth, but the words died when the warning alarm on his wrist tracker began to pulse, a sharp metallic tone that cut through the air. His visor flashed with incoming data, unidentified movement. "Proximity alert. Sector E12. Stay here," Cade said instinctively, grabbing his rifle. "What is it?" she asked, rising to her feet. "Not sure," he replied. "But it's not friendly." They moved quickly through the narrow corridors of Delta 7, the sound of their boots crunching on grit and metal shards. Cade's every muscle was tense. This colony was supposed to be dead. No automated system should still be running, which meant whatever was moving out there wasn't mechanical debris. It was something new. They reached the observation deck, and Cade crouched low behind a rusted barrier, peering through a cracked window. Down on the lower landing pads, a trio of shapes moved across the sand, squat, insect-like machines with long jointed legs. Their rusted frames were pitted with scars, but their sensors glowed red. Old scavenger drones, remnants of the war, still locked on their primary directive: eliminate anything non-human. "Damn it," Cade muttered. He'd heard of rogue drones like these, half-mad war relics still hunting decades after the ceasefire. "If they find you, they will attack me," Thesisa finished, her voice calm but tinged with worry. But they will attack you too if they sense you're with me. Those machines don't care about peace. They only care about their programming. Cade scanned the landing area, calculating options. The drones were slow but relentless, and his rifle wouldn't last long against their armor. We need to shut them down before they find the greenhouse. Thesisa touched his shoulder, her hand warm even through the fabric of his suit. I can help. My kind designed tech that could disrupt their sensors, but I'll need your help to connect to the systems in the command core. Cade's eyes narrowed. The core is half dead. Nothing here's been functional for years. Her golden eyes flickered with determination. Not dead. Just forgotten, like me. For a moment, Cade hesitated. Every instinct told him to run, to leave this place, to not get involved. But as the drones clambered closer, kicking up dust, with every metallic stride, he realized he couldn't walk away, not from her, and not from the strange pull he felt between them. Fine, he said, checking his ammo. You get that system running. I'll keep them busy. She looked at him, and something passed between them. Not just fear, but trust. You don't have to do this alone, she whispered. I know, Cade said, and for the first time in years he meant it. They split. Thesisa moved like a streak of pale light through the shattered corridors, her glowing tendrils casting ghostly reflections on the broken walls. Cade vaulted over debris, positioning himself near the landing pads. The first drone spotted him, its red optics flaring as it emitted a metallic screech and scuttled forward. Cade raised his rifle and fired, the shot sparking against its carapace. The air filled with the crackle of gunfire and the screech of machinery, the storm outside pounding against the dome like war drums. In the command core, Thesisa knelt before the ancient interface, her fingers sliding over the controls, her glow intensifying as she whispered in her own language, a fluid, melodic chant that resonated like music through the steel. The bond between them pulsed again, unbidden. Cade felt her determination surge through him like an electric current, steadying his hands as he fired at the advancing drones. And through the haze of smoke and sparks, her voice brushed his mind. Hold on. Just a little longer. I'm with you. He gritted his teeth, reloading as a drone lunged toward him. For once, he didn't feel like he was fighting alone. The last of the rogue drones collapsed in a heap of sparking metal, its legs twitching before going still. Cade stood over it, chest heaving, the Martian storm howling through a breach in the dome overhead. He lowered his rifle slowly, his gloves trembling as the adrenaline drained from his veins. The acrid smell of burned circuits and scorched sand filled the air. Somewhere deep in the outpost, old machinery whirred and clicked back to life, Thesisa's doing. He turned toward the command center, where she was waiting. When he found her, she was crouched on the floor, tendrils still glowing faintly as they retracted like coiled threads of light. Her face looked pale, tired, as though forcing the outpost systems back online had drained more than just her energy. For a moment, Cade hesitated in the doorway, watching her. The glow of the monitors cast her in colors both alien and beautiful, a quiet pulse of warmth in a place built for war and silence. You did it, he said, stepping forward. She looked up, her golden eyes heavy with exhaustion but still filled with that same quiet strength. We did it, she corrected softly. Your fire, my light. Neither alone would have been enough. Cade sat on the edge of the table opposite her, rubbing a hand over his face. You know, when I came here, I didn't expect to find anything alive. Just some broken tech, maybe a few scraps worth salvaging. Instead, he trailed off, unsure how to finish the thought. Instead, you found me, she said gently. Her words hung in the air, unshaken by the storm outside. He looked at her, really looked. The strange elegance of her features, the way her tendrils pulsed like they carried their own heartbeat. There was something about her presence that made the emptiness inside him feel less like a void and more like soil, waiting for something to grow. Then his wrist tracker blinked. The soft beep of an incoming transmission filled the silence. Cade's expression hardened as he tapped the interface. A voice crackled over the comm. Delta 7, this is Earth Command. We picked up your flare beacon. Status report, Hart. Are you alone? Cade's hand hovered over the mic. Alone. The word felt heavier now, almost foreign. He glanced at Thesisa, who was watching him silently, her glowing tendrils dimming as if she feared his answer. He clicked the comm. I'm operational, he said carefully. Encountered some hostile drones, but they're down. Delta 7 is secure. The voice on the other end didn't soften. Copy that. Are there any remaining alien signatures? Our sensors picked up interference around your sector. Cade hesitated. His gut told him what would happen if Earth Command learned about Thesisa. At best, they'd treat her as a threat, an enemy asset to be neutralized. At worst, they'd wipe the entire colony just to be sure. His fingers tightened on the comm device. No alien signatures, he lied. Just dead metal and dust. There was a long pause. Understood. Stand by for extraction orders? The signal cut out. Cade set the tracker down slowly, his jaw tight. Thesisa tilted her head. You lied for me, she said softly, almost as if she couldn't believe it. Cade looked at her, his voice rough. If I tell them you're here, they'll come for you. And they won't ask questions first. I don't want you to risk your life for me, she said, her tone carrying both gratitude and fear. Well, too late, he replied with a half-smile that didn't reach his eyes. I've already made my choice. Thesisa stood, her movements slow but deliberate. She walked toward him, stopping close enough that he could see the fine details of her luminous skin, the faint patterns that shifted under her surface like rippling water. You don't have to choose me, Cade, she said. If I leave, they'll never know. You'll go back to your world, and I'll fade, quietly. No one will remember I was ever here. Something inside him snapped at those words. I've spent years trying to forget, he said, his voice low. Forgetting my wife, forgetting the war, forgetting myself. I don't want to forget anymore. Thesisa's eyes widened slightly, glowing brighter as she whispered, then. What do you want? Cade stepped closer. I want this bond. I want to feel something again, something that's not pain or guilt. When you looked inside me, I didn't feel like I was drowning anymore. The storm outside slammed against the outpost walls, rattling the greenhouse glass like an impatient drumbeat. Thesisa reached out, brushing her fingers against his. The touch was small, but it felt like a promise. Then stay, she whispered. Stay, and I'll never let you drown again. Cade's comm unit beeped again, another message from Earth Command. He didn't answer. Instead, he let her hand slide into his, the bond humming faintly between them like the slow ignition of a star. For the first time since the war ended, Cade Hart wasn't thinking about survival. He was thinking about living. The storm raged like a living beast, clawing at Delta 7 as if determined to tear the outpost apart. Cade Hart stood in the command center, his breath shallow, the faint hum of the bond with Thesisa pulsing at the edge of his mind. The call from Earth Command still echoed in the room, their cold metallic voices demanding compliance. Extraction orders would come soon. They'd send ships. They'd scan for life. And if they found Thesisa, Cade didn't want to imagine what would happen. Thesisa was standing by the window, her glowing tendrils swaying in rhythm with the storm. The faint light radiating from her skin painted the walls with ghostly reflections like ripples in water. They'll come, she said quietly, not turning to face him. Humans never leave loose ends. They're not coming for you. Cade said, checking his rifle out of habit. Not while I'm here. She turned then, her golden eyes locking on him. You can't fight an entire fleet, Cade. You know this. They'll take me, and they'll call it security. And you'll be labeled a traitor just for protecting me. He gave a humorless laugh, leaning against the table. I stopped being anyone's soldier a long time ago. I don't care what they call me. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The silence between them wasn't empty anymore. It was heavy, loaded with unspoken decisions. Cade found himself staring at her, really seeing her, not just as some alien remnant of a war-torn past, but as someone alive, someone who had survived when everything told her she shouldn't. I don't want to hide anymore, she said, softly, but I also don't want you to sacrifice your life for mine. You're not a sacrifice, he said firmly. You're the first thing that's made me feel alive in years. Her breath caught, and she took a step closer. The bond flared faintly between them like the spark of a forgotten fire. Cade felt her emotions, a mixture of fear, hope, and something deeper. Something that mirrored what he felt but didn't know how to name. Before he could say more, the outpost alarms began to shriek. A proximity alert flashed across the cracked command monitors. Cade's eyes snapped to the screen. A small Earth patrol ship had entered Delta 7's orbit. Scanners were sweeping the colony. They're early, Cade muttered, grabbing his rifle. We have to move. Thesisa's glow intensified, her tendrils lifting like a halo. We can't outrun them. Then we make them blind, Cade said. Can you still access the core? She nodded. But it will cost me. That kind of energy drain. It could weaken me beyond recovery. Cade crouched in front of her, his gaze sharp. You're not doing this alone. We'll do it together. Through the bond, her eyes widened. Cade, if you strengthen the bond like this, it could change you. He hesitated, then smirked slightly. Maybe that's what I need. They moved quickly, descending into the bowels of Delta 7, where the fusion core lay dormant under layers of rust and dust. The air was heavy with static and the stench of old wiring. Cade connected the power relays while Thesisa pressed her glowing palms to the interface, her tendrils sparking faintly as they merged with the ancient circuits. Ready? She asked, her voice trembling. Cade took her hand. Do it. The bond exploded like a flash of light behind his eyes. For a moment, he wasn't Cade Hart, broken soldier. He was something more, a fusion of memories, instincts, and alien. Light. He felt her energy pouring through him, saw her world through her mind as she saw his. Together they reached into the outpost systems, overriding scanners, sending false signals, blinding the approaching patrol. But it wasn't just the system they touched. The bond deepened, going beyond shared emotions. Cade felt his pulse, syncing with hers. He could feel her heartbeat as if it were his own. Their thoughts overlapped, tangled, until he couldn't tell where he ended and she began. Cade, she whispered inside his mind, her voice trembling. If we keep this, you'll change. You won't be fully human anymore. I don't care, he replied, his voice steady even in thought. I'd rather change than go back to being empty. The core surged with power, lights flaring across the outpost like veins of fire. Outside, the patrol ship scanners faltered, blinded by the false signals streaming from Delta 7. Cade collapsed against the console, breathless, his vision flickering with alien light patterns. Thesisa fell to her knees beside him, her glow dimming but her eyes shining. They're pulling back, she said, relief in her tone. We're safe. Safe, he echoed, though he felt something strange stirring inside him, a warmth spreading through his veins, a faint shimmer under his skin when he caught his reflection in the console screen. The bond had left a mark on him, something permanent. 3 months later, Delta 7 was no longer a graveyard. Cade and Thesisa had rebuilt the greenhouse, coaxing life back into the soil. A small group of human scavengers and curious Valen travelers had arrived, tentatively forging their own connections. The war felt distant now, like a ghost finally allowed to rest. One night, under the Martian sky, Cade stood on the ridge overlooking the canyon. The stars burned cold and brilliant, but they didn't feel as lonely as they once had. Thesisa stood beside him, her hand finding his. "You let me in," she said softly, "even when you didn't have to." He turned to her, brushing his thumb against her glowing tendrils, which pulsed faintly at his touch. "Because you asked," he said, his voice low but certain. "And because I didn't want to be alone anymore either." As the wind swept across the ridge, Cade felt the warmth of the bond deep in his chest. It wasn't just survival anymore. It was something stronger, a new beginning, not just for him, but for both of them.